and a number of minutes for 2014. So I would entertain a motion to, let's see, do we have then the gift acceptance, Concord Carlisle Community Trust of $6,750 to the youth coordinator and $88,451 to the community service coordinator gift accounts. Very grateful to the community trust for those gifts. One-day special license, all alcoholic beverage license for CC Youth Hockey Annual Party at Concord Country Club on October 22nd from 7 to 11:30 p.m. Wine and malt beverage license for First Parish Gala Dinner to celebrate the New Order at 20 Lexington Road on September 17th from 7 to 9. Wine and malt beverage license for the American Legion Annual Picnic on August 14th at the Old Manse from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and a Sunday entertainment license for the American Legion Annual Picnic at the Old Manse, 269 Monument Street from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Would move that we accept the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Well, note we're down 2 members of the board, but we still have a quorum. The next item is the Executive Committee minutes of June 20th, 2016. I would request a motion to approve them not to be released.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me introduce Andrew Mara, who just started in the Selectman's office today. He comes to us from the Planning Office. They're sad to see him go. He was in the Planning Department for 3 years. So we're happy to have somebody that's so experienced with our system and the staff that work for the town.
It's his first day on the job,
This
right?
is his first day on the job and his first night meeting.
Well, welcome.
Welcome, Andrew. We're delighted to have you here. And
We hope that the planning office won't be too mad at us.
And the Concord Public Works Department is pleased to report that after that incident we had with the water supply a week ago, last Monday, the only damage seems to have been that a lock was broken off the cabinet at the Pine Hill Reservoir. We've sampled the entire system, including the storage reservoir, and there doesn't seem to be any contamination or any problems with the system. It was a rock was found at the bottom of the cabinet, so to speak. So it looked like the rock that was used to damage the lock was dropped into the water supply. I don't think the vandals knew what it was they were doing. So we're obviously going to step up security. They're going to take a look at all of our wells and storage reservoirs in Nagog Pond to be sure that we have adequate security in the future. And it will take a while to get the 5 million gallon reservoir back online. So the outdoor watering ban will remain in effect this week as we slowly let the reservoir come back into the system. So Public Works Department asked that we take another week of careful watering, and it is expected to be hot this week.
What steps are being taken on the security? How is that being looked into?
Well, we'll have a comprehensive review. We'll get a consultant in to take a look at our entire system and see what the recommendations are. We should probably have some security cameras and probably more fencing and some things that we've avoided doing because a lot of our facilities are in the woods, and it's nice to be able to walk by them. But we may have to increase security.
Unfortunate day and age, one has to be concerned about that type of thing.
downside could be pretty
So,
dramatic.
and some concrete slabs have been placed on top of the cabinet so that they won't be easily gotten into again. So let me see. The Public Works Department is on a trial basis opening the compost area from 3 p.m. to 5:30 on Wednesdays. A lot of residents have asked if they could have the opportunity to utilize the compost area other than Saturday. Last week was the first time, and there was a lot of activity. So
No, you can't bring things. The dump's not open.
The dump is no longer open. Only leaf and yard waste. And that sort of thing. So
you can bring yard waste.
You can bring yard waste.
Right.
That's
On
what it's
Fridays.
for. On Wednesdays from 3 to 5:30, as well as Saturday. It's always been open on Saturday
For Wednesday.
from 9 to 3, but the Wednesday from 3 to 5:30 is a trial because some people couldn't get there on the weekend. So sorry about that.
Chris, do we know, did Public Works ever communicate with National Grid or vice versa about the issue of the gas line on Muscataquid? Remember a number of meetings ago, they came and said that there was a disagreement and they were going to try to work it out.
There was conversations between National Grid and Public Works leading up to that. I don't know that there's been
Since
any
then.
conversation since then, and that was the question of bringing the gas main, the full frontage along the
Yeah.
property line. They're saying they're prohibited by the DPU from doing that, and we don't believe they are.
We just said to bring some proof of it, and
And
I'm
there-
just curious if they have.
There's been no proof.
Okay,
forthcoming.
thank you.
Let me see, road closure, Liberty Street, the Public Works is trying to get some construction done this summer when it has a less impact on the school year, so you see a lot of activity taking place. And Liberty Street is closed, at least during the day, starting today, Monday through Friday, for construction because the material does not support a single lane of traffic or alternate lane, so the road's completely closed from Barnes Hill Road to Monument Street. But hopefully next week, the work will be done at the end of this week and be open back up during the day next week. There's also traffic construction advisory on Powder Mill Road as they reclaim that road, and in that case, there should be alternate lane traffic, so you should be able to get through, but it will be a little bit slow. And that road was in difficult shape, so it's good that they're getting to it. Representative Corey Atkins called to report that the firefighter residency bill that town meeting authorized the select board to petition for legislation was approved by the House over the weekend, I guess. I don't recall whether the Senate, I know Senator Barrett discussed it. It isn't clear to me whether it passed the Senate, so I'll have to check with Senator Barrett. And
But they're out of session,
if
so-
it's been approved, yeah, so hopefully it did get passed. And there was some action on it in June, I think it was, in the Senate. So I didn't get confirmation that it approved the Senate. But it's got by the House, which is helpful. Finance Director Tony Gabo conducted his annual orientation for new and experienced Finance Committee members last Thursday, and the new Finance Director, Kerry LaFleur, attended, and it helped to have her hear about the background of the town's finances. White Pond, no algal blooms in place so far, knock on wood, so things are much
very small
better.
this year.
The pond is small, yeah, the water line is receding.
There's the support.
And the state issued its cherry sheet state aid numbers, the final numbers after the budget was approved, and thanks to Tony's conservative cost estimating, then we're ahead $380,000 for the town. That's all I have to report.
Any additional questions, Town Manager? All right, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Good evening, please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, my name is Nina Vicarius. I'm the law firm of Anderson and Krieger. We are town council.
And Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management for the town and Project Manager for the town.
So we have before you a few agenda items on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. I'm going to give an overview of all of the items that will be before you this week and next week, and then we'll walk through them, the ones we can get to tonight, one by one. As you may recall from town meeting, there were votes authorizing the selectmen to acquire by purchase, eminent domain or otherwise, various property rights that are necessary for building the phase of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, Phase 2C, that goes through Concord. The deadline established by the state to comply with federal funding requirements are coming up in about a week and a half or so. So August 17th, I believe, is our deadline given to us by MassDOT to get them everything. What MassDOT requires for the submissions is proof of property rights over all of the various public, state-owned lands where the trail will actually go. Those are owned by MassDOT Rail, as well as temporary easements in most cases over some private property, some MBTA-owned, and some town-owned property. And I'll get to those as we go through them. And in Concord's case, there are 3 permanent easements that are also required over private property. And if I missed any particular properties, again, as we go through, we'll talk through them. So there are many properties to go through. We've mostly Marcia has spent a lot of the summer reaching out to all of the affected property owners. We've worked a lot with the state to try to finalize the various agreements that need to Rail, which is a different entity, and the Department of Corrections as the other state entity that's involved because of all as landowners in this case. So I'm going to walk through the votes that will be taken. Most of these are in your packet tonight. There are some that were late breaking that are not, and there might be slight adjustments to some that I'll mention when we get to them in detail. But again, just sticking with the overview for a moment. Starting with town-owned property, if you recall, I think it was the very last article or second to last at town meeting, is a vote, was authorization for the town to grant and accept easements over its own land, which may seem unnecessary. Frankly, it probably is. But from the federal rail perspective, they require it. They don't trust towns to say we will just do it, so they require it. So that is one vote that will be before you tonight. It is to grant an easement to the town and to accept it on behalf of the town. So in effect, you're really not changing any of your property rights, you're just confirming it. I did note that that vote is currently drafted as having this select board sign the entire vote. Because the only notary we have here is also a select board member, it may actually be easier when we get to that to add one very small addition to the vote to authorize the town manager to sign and accept on behalf of the town, and then we could do that tomorrow or whatever in front of a notary and be all set. So that's the first one. That's the easiest of these. That's the town. And those addresses are 30 Y Powder Mill Road and 6B Commonwealth Ave. The next set of votes, some of which you can do tonight, some of which you can't, are this other state-owned properties, as I mentioned. The longest term one is a 99-year lease. Excuse me, there's one permit. So one of the long-term ones is a 99-year lease with the MassDOT Rail Division. That is for the actual bed, what will become the trail.
Trail itself.
Effectively, obviously. On the edges, there may be differences, but effectively that's what it is. The lease is currently being finalized in its review by MassDOT. It's almost identical to what Acton signed last year with MassDOT for their portion of it, so there shouldn't be any surprises. We've had the town's risk manager review the insurance provisions as well with Concord in mind. So that one is you're not going to vote on tonight, but just that's coming next week. The two that you will be able to vote on today are with the MBTA. There's a license agreement necessary to do temporary work. So just as a clarification for those who may not have followed the project, the work here is going to be done by MassDOT contractors, but the town is still the project proponent, so really it's sort of loops around that way, that the town authorizes MassDOT on the property to be doing the work. In any event, it's a license agreement, meaning the T could revoke it, but there is a 30-day notice, and we have no reason to be concerned about revocation because the T has been an active participant in this process. That license agreement, again, follows the T standard form. You do have a vote in your packet to vote to authorize the town manager to sign that, and that's what the only thing the T requires is town manager's signature. And you also have a copy in your packet of the license itself. In this case, that license is final. That was put to bed.
Is that what it's called, description of MBTA easement?
The description of the easement is, well, I'll get to in a second. It's a separate document.
Okay.
The license is referred to as a Mass Bay Transportation Authority licensed MBTA railroad properties. So it's a thicker document about, it's 15 pages plus a few exhibits.
And the licensing puts the liability on the town, is that correct?
In some respects, yes. So
I'm just wondering, I assume that we've looked into that from the insurance perspective, yeah.
And one of the things that the town can take advantage of here is that because MassDOT's doing the work, the MassDOT lease will claw back some of that liability. And when MassDOT's doing the work, and the town, in fact, can't be on the property without its permission. So there's a good distinction
Okay.
of practices to help with that issue, and then also insurance requirements.
That was just one of my concerns, is obviously the issue of making sure that any insurance issue has been looked at.
It certainly has, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a challenge, too.
It was a challenge. We did get some concessions
Yeah,
on
it looked like it might be.
So that's the MassDOT license. So that is temporary, it doesn't last forever. There are then what the chair just referred to, the MBTA easements, and those are permanent easements over certain MBTA-owned parcels to allow the bike path to exist in the future. They're both actually for parts of the bike path. So you have a vote in front of you that with descriptions of MBTA easements behind it. That vote tonight, just so you're aware, is again to authorize the town manager to enter into the easement in substantially the form that we have here. That one is not quite yet final because the MBTA is doing one final review. We don't expect it to change much,
Yeah.
but so that won't be filed tomorrow. This will be recorded eventually as well.
But we will approve it tonight
You would be approving if you're
substantially as presented,
Exactly.
with the notion that
If there's any major changes,
somebody will
Exactly.
pay attention to that.
Yeah. We don't expect any major changes. It's been reviewed up and down the chain there, but they have to internally review.
Mina, let me ask you a procedural question. All of the signature material that we have here in the folder has all 5 members of the select board's name on
Right.
it. We only have 3 people here tonight, so it's a quorum.
That's sufficient. None of this requires a supermajority, and it's okay
Just
that.
wanted to be sure.
That's good. So that takes care of the transportation agencies. The last state agency involved is the Department of Corrections. I'll let Marcia explain some of the process on the land transfer. And this is one of the late-breaking votes, so we may be able to do that.
There are 2 components to the Department of Corrections land. One is, you recall the outreach to Senator Barrett's office over the past year. Legislation went forward. It was finalized at the end of July. We will be getting a copy once it is signed by the governor. I do not yet have confirmation that it has been signed by the governor, but we're expecting it to be, and I will have a copy of that. That is for the half-acre parcel of land that is across the street from MCI Concord, across Commonwealth Ave, which is where we will be locating a small parking facility with 18 parking places, plus a kiosk and information and bike racks for people to stop there and then use the trail. The other component is the driveway access over behind Department of Corrections. They will continue to have an entrance at approximately the same location, just north of MCI Concord fence, and then the new driveway will parallel the fence. We will be eliminating the driveway access that used to go all the way down and around and over what is now the Concord Housing Development Corporation land. So we've connected Commonwealth Ave to the easterly side of MCI Concord. That is a temporary easement for us to be able to construct that driveway. And I just received today the right of entry, because a right of entry says you are allowed to come onto the property to do the work. It is a document that doesn't require to be recorded. This was an easier, more efficient way of getting through everything and meeting our deadlines with Mass DOT.
But it's sufficient for Mass DOTs and federal rails purposes.
Yes.
Is there a termination date for the right, or is it just when it's completed?
When it's completed.
Okay.
I believe it's 3 years.
All of our temporary easements or rights of way have been staged for a 3-year period, which should be sufficient. If there is a need in between, we certainly will have to monitor it to make sure that anything can be extended. So that's the state. Moving on to the private property, similar to what Marcia just described with the Department of Correction, there is in the packet a very brief 1-paragraph vote compared to the rest very brief on 3 properties that were gratefully donated by property owners. They've donated rights of entry, waiving their right to any compensation, and similar to what Marcia said, provides access during that temporary period. So there's a vote for you to authorize acceptance of that, effectively, similar to accepting a gift, in this case, accepting property access. Which, at this point, nothing else can really be done tonight, but let me just very briefly explain what's happening with private property owners, so that you're aware for next week. The private property owners, as I mentioned, there's a multi-step process, including a lot of contact, a lot of prior outreach, starting, I think, back months ago, if not earlier. There are, from the federal regulations require a appraisal to be done, and then a review of that appraisal to be done by an independent appraiser, or a right of entry or a waiver of appraisal. We have appraisals for all of the properties that, other than these donated ones, completed. We had the independent appraiser verify them. In every case, the estimates came out the same, so that's good. Our appraisals are both ones that MassDOT uses for many, many right-of-way projects. There is then a offer letter that goes out, so you may have seen a version of that at some point, an offer letter that goes out to each property owner explaining the process, explaining that there has been an appraisal, that they have rights to that compensation in return for 3-year easement, for the most part, some permits, but for the most part, 3-year easement. And it also notifies them that if they don't agree to the easement, the town reserves its right to order a taking as necessary. And along the way, there's also, after we sent the offer letters, which was on July 15th, we have to wait 30 days before any action can be taken on those unless a property owner responds earlier. So that's why that's next week. It certainly leaves us with a short amount of time to approve and then record, but that should be okay. The other point just on the takings piece of it is we know that obviously the communication with these property owners is key, so we've kept on trying to talk to them. And I think Marcia's now heard from all but 3 of the private property owners in the past month, I think. At some point has heard from or talked to everybody. We also have done our own additional due diligence in terms of title work, et cetera, to verify that what the assessors have in their database is consistent with current owners and so on. So next week, assuming we have in front of us signed easement agreements signed by the property owners, you'll be voting to authorize Chris to accept those easements, and that will be recorded as any voluntary transaction. There are 3 of those that are permanent easements, one for part of the bike path, one for site, basically to clear some areas so that there is not a dangerous intersection, and one that is for rerouting part of the roadway. And the rest, as I said, are all temporary. To the extent you have easements in hand, you can just accept them. To the extent that somebody refuses to sign, doesn't sign, neglects to sign, the town would have to order a taking. So you'll have before you, perhaps, I don't know yet, an order of taking for the remaining properties that we don't have a.
Can you tell us, of course I hope, we all hope probably that there's as few of those as necessary, but there's a difference between we haven't been able to contact these folks, but we have to move ahead anyway,
right,
and property owners who aren't going forward.
Right.
I have met with everyone or talked to them on the phone or had email conversations. What we haven't heard back from is the latest, the letter of offer. The 3 property owners have not contacted me again. And I did follow up emails, and I will continue to reach out this week as we're counting down to next Monday night.
That's 3 folks?
Pardon?
3
property owners.
And do you know, Marcia, have they at any time indicated their unwillingness or lack of interest in trying to do this?
No, when I met on site with each of them, talking about the process, talking about what would be happening, it was with the appraiser. Mm-hmm. So they had that opportunity to ask questions, to find out more. They now know the value of the easements that they've been asked to provide to the town. And I don't know why they haven't, because
Yeah, sure.
they were very positive about the rail trail moving forward. There were 18 property owners initially that we would be seeking easements from. The 2 that were opposed, I was able to work with the design engineer to eliminate the need for the easements over those properties. So I was trying very hard to make sure that all of the owners involved would be at least amenable to the trail going forward.
If it is necessary to go to court, is it land court or Superior Court?
It is typically the Superior Court on that, and we are right that vests after the taking, after they can accept payments. So sort of the normal takings process as with any property. Most of these, just so you know the scope of, even if we do have takings, the vast majority of the temporary easements are $5,000 or less, and even the permanents, I think, only one is more than 20,000.
Right.
And so just a note on that one, for procedural reasons, you may end up doing a taking even though that property owner agrees and understands full well, but just because of the value of the property, it may, from a state law perspective, in order to meet the timelines, a friendly taking might be necessary rather than a voluntary easement. Otherwise, you'd have to go through a longer advertising process.
What's the procedure if we do a volunteer, if we do a taking next Monday and next Tuesday the property owner shows up and says, whoa, wait a minute.
Sure. So there's the payment would be on its way probably. They would be entitled to accept it, called pro tanto, meaning they can accept it and still contest the amount of damages. It doesn't void the taking.
Any eminent domain taking.
Like any eminent domain taking, that's right. And then there's a little bit of that's meant as a protection for both sides. They can accept it, but if a court sides with the town,
Yep.
it will, they might have costs involved. The one thing I would note too, because of the low amount involved, the town can always try to resolve those issues as they come up. So because there's a long window for takings, there's often a period where we could at least try to address what the concerns are, see if there's any validity to the concerns with
right.
appraisals. Again, we are hopeful that aside from the potential procedural reason to do one taking, that you don't have any order of taking whatsoever in front of you, but that's that's what you just preparing you for that potential. So,
Do we have any way that we recognize people who have voluntarily given, do sort of a way of thanks? I assume at least a letter, but
I don't
some
know
other
why
form.
we couldn't have you folks generate a list of the property owners who've been able to help us, and we could certainly make sure it's announced at the meeting on the 15th and generate letters of thanks. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why not?
And actually, there is a formal procedure. I've been working with Finance Director Tony Legalbo to acknowledge the donations that are given for those.
Good.
And who does the acknowledging?
Who does? If you would like it to be you, I suppose. But
Legally, the Finance Director
yes.
Finance director. But the board could certainly just weigh in as fellow citizens, kind of.
Thank you to the stewards of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail construction
Could
project.
we get a list then? I think the
Yes.
board would
We'll have a list.
be happy to recognize those contributions made, independent of whatever legal responsibilities we have. That'd be great.
so if you're not sick of hearing from me, we can actually proceed through this.
Give it a try.
So the very first of these, and this is item 5 on the agenda, now separating them out, is the vote to approve the intra-town easements. As I mentioned on this one, this one is the page in your packet, you'll see in the middle 30Y Powder Mill and 6B Commonwealth. Originally, these easements were drafted with a signature page that included all of the select board, excuse me. My suggestion would be to modify paragraph A of the vote, which currently starts with to grant and accept the easements, to, at the very end, before the and, simply say, and to authorize the town manager to execute the same. So if that's acceptable to you.
So this is item B.
This is item A on the vote, yeah. It can actually go either place because you're already authorized to take any other.
So Andrew, do you have a record of that?
Yeah, so we're modifying A to add, is it the end of it, to authorize town manager to execute as
To execute the same.
the same?
Before that semicolon
Today's date?
and the date should be filled in all the blanks for today's date.
And that's what we have. We don't, so what's in our signature packet does not include, it certainly doesn't include that. It has a space for the date. Is it acceptable for us to simply write the date in?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
That's fine.
so we'll get a new one, we'll get a new draft for the one on Powder Mill Road and Commonwealth Avenue that includes that language.
I think that's fine. Is that something that can happen?
Posts.
Yeah, I'm just wondering in terms of timing. It would be great if you could sign tonight, but I'm not sure if it's possible.
Can it be written in?
I think it can be in this case. Yeah. I don't believe this will be recorded separately, so.
All right.
Well, assuming you've got neat handwriting.
Okay, so let me ask again a procedural question. These documents are, some of them fairly extensive. So what I would like to know is if the motion could simply be moved to approve as contained in agenda item number 5.
That's correct, and in this case, as amended.
As amended. Okay, but it could be, the motions could be as simple as that.
I believe so, that's right. I think the packets were made public beforehand and will be
Yes, the packets, information
Yeah.
made public, so, yeah. All right, would you like us to take that action on, are you ready?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion.
we move to approve the agenda item number 5 as amended.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Which is next?
So next is the vote on the license agreement with the MBTA.
Okay,
And that is, you will see, that's agenda item 6. And you should have before you a vote that starts with one paragraph and another offset paragraph that reads to approve and authorize the town manager to execute the offset. Is that, just make sure we're all looking at the same.
Yep.
So this is to authorize the town manager to sign the now finalized version of the MassDOT license.
it does not say the MBTA in it anywhere. is it? I'm looking at the same one
It
you're
says
looking.
Lowell Secondary Track.
Lowell Secondary Track
So
Railroad.
that is a description of the land up top. If you see the actual, to approve and authorize the town manager.
Yeah.
It says by and between the Massachusetts Bay.
Down below.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, all right,
Yeah, the above is the reference to the plan
got it, okay.
associated with this.
You entertain a motion?
Move to approve item number 6.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. And that one, as I mentioned, is ready for the town manager to sign whenever the actual lease, so that, or excuse me, the actual license, so Marcia and Chris can coordinate that. Moving on to the other MBTA document, which is the you should have, this is item number 7 in the agenda.
So I don't have it tagged.
That's right, the 3 properties?
This is the one that talks about the MBTA authority BP-1, BP-2, is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so reference BP1, which, and those, by the way, for those, again, listening or for
Okay.
the record, that's the names of the particular
Those
easements.
for the descriptions.
Number
And the
7.
descriptions are provided behind it of those 2 easements.
Okay.
as
Got it.
well as the current form, not yet ready for execution of the easement. Again, this would be a vote to authorize execution by town manager in substantially this form. So because this is being finalized by the MBTA, there may be slight changes.
Move to approve item number 7, be signed by the town manager substantially as formed or
Presented. yeah.
presented.
Second.
Does that work?
That works.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
The vote itself does not have to change. Item number 8, I would recommend tabling at this meeting. This is the lease with the MassDOT Rail Division.
So we'll postpone action until the 15th on that item, is that correct?
That's correct. Right, we're almost there. You should now have in front of you, as part of agenda item 9, which has actually multiple pieces. Sorry, I don't want to go too fast.
No.
That's just,
Yeah.
So there's various votes in there. You'll see I believe the shortest one should be included in your packet.
we have that as well.
I'll read the beginning of it just to make sure. A duly called public meeting of the Concord Select Board on August blank, will be August 8th. If the board voted to approve acceptance of rights of entry onto the portions of 3A Westgate Park, 51 Derby Street, and 6X Winthrop Street. Those are the donated parcels, donated by private property owners that Marcia mentioned. So a vote here would be to authorize the town manager to accept those on your behalf.
Move to approve, gratefully approve the town manager to accept the gifts. This would be item number 9, but it's one piece of number 9.
Exactly, yes.
So,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, and then the final vote that you're able to take tonight, which you don't have a formal written vote for, but you could take the vote and do it, and just have to work with, this doesn't have to be recorded, that shouldn't be an issue. The vote that you, if you would like to, you could also vote to accept the right of entry onto the Department of Correction property, which was donated by the Department of Corrections. So that should come as a normal vote as opposed to, normal motion as opposed to.
And to authorize the town manager.
And to authorize.
We don't have any paper on that.
No, that came very late in the day today. Sure.
It is 965 Elm Street.
So we move to approve the donation from the Department of Corrections for the town manager's approval, right?
And to authorize the town
To
manager.
authorize the town manager to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And that takes care of what we can take care of tonight, so thank you.
And then we'll have the 15 easements or however many.
Right, and so just to clarify how that vote will work, assuming they're all easements, you have in your packet drafts of what they might look like. Obviously, the lists are subject to change. You'll see there's a very long list. It'll be one vote to authorize Chris to do all of this, so that the town manager will be signing a lot of them.
Okay.
And so, as opposed to 15 separate votes.
Okay, I want to just ask a question. On the very long MBTA packet.
Sure.
So there's a place on the front of it which we approved for the selectmen to sign. And then the next document that's on here is the lease agreement. And at the back of the lease, it has a signature block for the town. Is that the town manager?
That can be the town manager as well. So when that is ready, that lease is not one of the ones you approved tonight.
That's not ready.
That's not for tonight.
The lease isn't ready, but
That's
the
right.
recorded vote of the,
No, there's 3 separate, and there's a lease with MassDOT.
Yeah.
There's a license with MBTA, and then there are easements with MBTA. So the one you're referring to, Mr. Chair, is the lease with MassDOT Rail, not the Mass State Transit Authority.
It's a 99-year lease.
That's a 99-year lease.
This
That's
is-
for the rail.
This is a
bed.
license agreement.
So you're looking, so maybe you were looking at that. The license agreement you did approve, and yes, the answer is that can be signed by the town manager. Your vote was to authorize the town
Yeah,
manager.
that's, so we've signed the authorization. So, Chris, I'm going to hand that over to you.
And that one's ready to go.
That one seems ready to go. Okay.
All right.
The list that we have of all the properties, if there are easements, will there be a separate list that we be advised as to what the payments would be, the cost of the easements? Or is, how does that work? I mean, the town treasurer has that information.
That's right. Each particular easement, which we can make sure is in the packet for next, it'll be a lot, but it can be in the
Yeah.
packet, has in it a amount identified, which
Okay.
it matches the appraisal
Okay.
amount. And to the extent that it has to be done through a taking,
Yeah.
not an easement, the order of taking will say in it,
The amount.
X parcel, an amount, yeah.
Okay.
As well as other
Yeah,
information.
right.
And so, Mina, thanks very much for your help navigating us through this. Marcia, I know you've been working on this a lot, so we're grateful to you for all you've done. And we'll look forward to bringing this chapter to an end next Monday.
Probably not too many projects are going to be as complicated as this.
I don't know if Chris reported to you that you wrote a letter 2 weeks ago. I presented that to the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and they approved the amendment number 5, so we have full funding for this construction project, which will go to advertising August 27th. And then we hope I think the bids will be due sometime this fall, work on the contract over the winter, and then hopefully construction will start late spring, early summer next year.
That's just terrific. But again, thanks.
It really has worked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. So we're grateful. That's terrific.
Chair, I thought I'd ask Mina to stay for your discussion on the signed bylaw.
We would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. So we have a couple items before we get to it, but you're welcome just to stay there. The next item is a carryover from last week, which is a proclamation recognizing the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. And I drafted, as you know, a proclamation. Before we do anything, I need to disclose again that my wife is a superintendent of Minuteman National Historical Park. I have filed a disclosure with the town clerk, and the Ethics Commission has said that I can both participate and vote in these procedures. So I would entertain a motion to approve the proclamation, noting that the proclamation will be read at an event at the National Park on August 22nd.
27th.
27th, thank
Yeah.
you, in which Congresswoman Tsongas will be there, and we'll read the proclamation at that time.
I would so move to approve the proclamation and authorize the chair to present and read the proclamation at the Park Service event on August 27th.
A
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item is a notification that we received, the intent to provide Keno to go at the 7-Eleven store. And just a reminder that our ability here is not so much an approval of this process, but if we don't want to approve it, we have the right to object. Okay? So I'm happy to have a discussion.
Just mention that there is two previously licensed establishments, the Concord Elks that relinquished the license when they sold the property had Keno to go, and then 9 Acre Corner convenience store currently has and operates a Keno to go license.
So there's one in town that
So
has.
there's one currently operating in town. The board chose not to object in either of those instances. The lottery discourages communities from rejecting these licenses because the lottery is a source of revenue for local aid. So they sort of hint that maybe your local aid would be impacted by this. But nevertheless, the board has the right to oppose.
Does the town, do you,
Again, the board chose not to in 2 prior instances, and there was no consequences as a result.
but I'm asking, is there objection by you?
No, I don't think I did check with the police chief. He has no objection to the current, the history.
Saw
that we
the
have.
letter you provided us, yeah.
All right. What's your pleasure? I think that if our pleasure is we don't object, we don't need to do anything.
Do anything, right.
I guess I'll ask then, is there a motion to oppose this initiative?
No.
Hearing none then, we don't oppose it, and we'll move on. So the next is, in fact, signage. My background, and then we'll hear from folks who actually know about this, is you'll recall that our sign, bylaws were declared, I don't know if they were declared unconstitutional, but
We were just urged to revise them
we
and to
were-
eliminate any references to political groups and religious institutions.
and so we did that at town meeting, and now,
And Mina, do you want to comment on the Attorney General
Sure.
the review of the sign
Sure,
bylaws?
the Attorney General commented, as her office does, on bylaws. It was a fairly lengthy comment, but a lot of it reminded the town, of course, they don't get the benefit of why bylaws are passed or not passed, or why they are brought up, that, by the way, there's this Arizona case and there's a Supreme Court decision, and you ought to think about it. Essentially rehashing a lot of the conversation that you had before town meeting and at town meeting of why a community might want to revisit its bylaw. And as the AG's office typically does in bylaw reviews raising constitutional issues, close by saying we really don't take a position on constitutional issues. It's outside the scope of what the Attorney General reviews for, other than flagrant violations. So when there's that kind of issue. So the AG opinion on the bylaw was an approval, but just cautioned, that this is an evolving area of law, which is consistent with what we've told the town and what what the select board discussed, I believe.
Be fair to say that's often how it's enforced as much as what the language is.
I think that's fair to say, and certainly, and I think this came up in the conversations around town meeting, that this is a evolving.
Yeah.
Certainly, these particular issues of content neutral signs and what is a content neutral sign is an evolving issue.
So there may be court decisions handed down in the next 2 or 3 years that might provide some light.
There may be.
but shouldn't we be I understand from the town manager that subsequent to the issue here that enforcement, am I remembering correctly, that enforcement of the town's existing bylaw, you've halted that, is that correct?
Well, there was some regulations adopted by me in relative to the use of town-owned land, particularly the public right-of-way. So I think the bylaw was, we didn't have many problems with the sign bylaw relative to permanent signs. The issue was temporary signs in the public right-of-way, and the way we tried to deal with it, we had regulations entitled political and charitable signs, and those are, content references are no longer constitutional. So we have this void, I would say, and I'm beginning to see an increase of temporary signs in the public right-of-way. The issue there was that we allowed political signs, charitable signs, for up to 14 days in the public right-of-way, usually around a fundraising event or something like that, or a Fen School open house, the election, and we asked people to remove the signs promptly after the event took place. The challenge came, it was just a verbal challenge, but we Council's office got a call from the ACLU saying you've got realtors and roofers and commercial people putting up signs in the right-of-way for, indefinitely until the house sells, could be 6 months or however long, but the political sign can only stay for 14 days. That's probably not defensible. So we suspended enforcement of the regulation, not the sign bylaw itself, but the regulation. And the chair, you suggested to me we should probably just take it down altogether because it no longer, water, so to speak. So I haven't done that, but we should take it off the website. But we haven't adopted any rules governing other people's signs in the public right-of-way. And there is a lot of interest, as your next agenda item will reference, for and off-premise signs. Those aren't necessarily off-premise signs. Home or an isolated farm or small business, they're often looking to put signs, off-premise signs in multiple locations in the public right-of-way, either temporarily or permanently. And right now we don't have any regulations governing that use of public property.
Just on that note, your ability to regulate commercial signs is still is not nearly as limited as it is for political religions.
But the issue with that is, we can't be in any way discriminatory about what kind of commercial signs. So
Right.
we can't say, well, the lawn guys, we don't want their signs up, but the realtors, we don't care.
That's not what the most recent Supreme Court decision didn't get into that category as between different commercial entities, but certainly I think it would be prudent to be careful on that.
Follows the,
Right. The real focus on that was, up until the decision, it was okay to say political signs of any kind are not allowed, but religious ones are. And now, if you have to read the sign to figure out which kind it is, that's an issue. Because, again, subject to probably a lot more clarification from the lower courts.
Well, I don't know how we do this, but it seems to me we ought to have some guidance for folks. We've seen, I think I've seen I wouldn't call it overwhelming, but I've seen an increase in signs around town. I mean, I don't consider them necessarily offensive or anything, but we ought to be providing some guidance, yes?
Yes, or otherwise, I think people will put signs in the public right-of-way as often as they want, which I think raises some issues. And then do they take them down? And part of the regulations we had did say the signs had to come down, and you had to register. You had to put your name down, so we had a contact person if the sign stayed up too long, and that sort of thing. So we could consider adopting rules. I think this fall we may have some campaign signs that are out there. People have been generally pretty good about of removing them after it's over and not putting them in traffic islands and on the monuments or cemetery property, that sort of thing. But people always push the limit. So right now we have no guidance for them, and we're allowing, again, real estate signs and contractor signs and all those types of signs indefinitely in the public right-of-way. And I think what we'd have to do is adopt rules that would apply to all types of signs, whether it's election related.
Could we differentiate between commercial signs and non-commercial signs?
Yes, you can do that. You have to be careful. I think this was, again, the part of the issue here is actually I think the town had been trying to favor non-commercial signs. But just by virtue of it takes longer to paint than 14 days sometimes, that they were getting, there was an argument out there that they might be getting favored treatment. So yes, you could do it, but we'd have to
be careful.
yeah.
So I'd be looking for guidance from the board if you want to wait and see how things go, or if you want to be proactive and look at a draft of regulations.
These are, whatever they are, they're adopted by the select board?
They were adopted by the town manager, who has, under the charter, has control of the municipal property that's not in the control of the school committee. And that was intended to keep the heat off the board if there was an unpopular decision.
Sounds good.
That's a nice way of saying to put the heat on the town manager.
We don't need anything else. So it might be a path forward to simply say that we would encourage you to develop and to come back to the board. So you just look for guidance
Okay, yep, that would be fine. It actually originally dated, I believe, back to the Proposition 2.5 overrides. We had, I think, 7 years in a row of Proposition 2.5 overrides, and there was some dispute over who had the right to put their signs favoring or not favoring the override in certain locations, traffic islands, and that sort of thing. So we tried to get some rationality to
The locations can be restricted as long as it applies to all signage.
That's
Right.
correct, and as long as there's legitimate safety
Yeah,
reasons for it.
public safety, whatever.
Or a monument, a war memorial would ask people not to post signs.
Yeah.
But there could be an ordinance or a rule that says there can be no temporary signs in the public right of way.
Well,
Potentially. Sorry to give you a very lawyerly answer there, but potentially yes, depending on, there's all kinds of tests of how much is left how much free speech room is left, and so.
Well, we don't have any control over what somebody puts in their own.
Certainly not, no, on private property, but there isn't a categorical rule that says you can.
We're under affirmative responsibility to provide space for, let's call it speech.
I don't know if I can answer the question quite that way, but
Well, I know Kevin Vaught advised us earlier that if the town posts our own signs for elections and back-to-school nights and different things like that, then the public should have some locations, which we decided with the Harvey Wheeler School and
Seems
Emerson
reasonable.
Field, I think.
Yeah.
So if we're posting signs, then the
so
general-
should the public.
But it might well be worth finding out what other communities, if they've come up with any regulations, and also whether, ACLU has any.
Didn't the ACLU say, this is a really hard question?
they acknowledge that this was.
I think it is a hard question.
And I think there, often when you read the cases on this, it does come down to the facts where, is this a town where there really is no other public space but the one strip of land that the town said you can't put signs on, or is this somewhere where you were restricting, Boston Common, but not every other public way? Boston, that's a bad example.
So the restrictions could be either on the actual sites themselves or the amount of time?
They could be on anything that's time, manner, and place.
Time, manner, and
effectively.
place, right.
As long as they're rational, there's a rational basis for that, and as long as there is a neutral application of it, I think there's a good way to justify those. Again, as the case law develops, we might get clearer guidance. The Supreme Court itself, even though it was a rare decision, there was the consenting opinion said, we don't know what towns are going to do with this. Best of luck.
Well, I think it would probably be tricky to have anything in place for the fall election. That seems. So I don't think there's any real urgency unless we all of a sudden start seeing, hundreds of signs all over the place, and it looks like a strip mall coming through town. But so you'll go ahead and do that.
I'll begin to prepare, or at least delegate to Marcia.
Yeah, I think. Well, she's got all this free time now. She doesn't have to worry about
Trim and rail trail, all done.
just a long-range plan, but I don't think that's really a big time. Okay, great. And I would just one comment on what you said, germane to the next item. These are all temporary signs that we're talking about, not permanent signs.
That's
Okay, great. Thank you, Mina, for staying and doing
Thank you.
that, Marcia. And next, though, we have a sign request from the Wild and Scenic River folks. Miss Brown. Good evening. And if you could, for the record, identify yourselves, please.
Alyssa Brown with the Suasco River Stewardship Council, and
I'm Allison Field-Juma, also with the Subriaspet and Concord River Wild and Scenic
Welcome.
Stewardship Council.
Delighted you're here. All right, we have your letter,
yep, I have
the
show
sign.
and tell, a copy of the sign. This one is for the Sudbury River, but there are also signs for the Suasco River and the Concord River. And to give you our pitch, these are signs that have been put up in the other towns in the Suasco River watershed, and on Mass DOT property they're currently on, although highly faded, on Mass DOT lands. And we, I guess, are asking you that they be placed as permanent signs, because we think that although people in Concord, have a good understanding of the rivers for their scenic and recreational value, they don't necessarily have a good understanding of that sort of the unique ecology of these rivers with its relationship to, for example, Great Meadows, the prehistoric sites that led to this being nominated as a wild and scenic river, its importance to colonial settlement and the Revolutionary War, and the literary and values associated, with the Transcendentalist movement. So we feel that by putting up, these signs, we can really enhance the public's awareness and understanding of this really unique resource in their area. In addition, it will help a little bit, and this is helpful, but we have these 3 rivers in town, which I know confuse people enormously, and numerous crossings, so that people are never aware whether they're on the Assabet, the Sudbury, the Concord, and how they relate together. And I think this would help understand, increase their awareness, their appreciation of the unique aspect of this river. This is only one of 3 wild and scenic river designations in Massachusetts, and neither of the other 2 have this kind of association with the cultural and historic resources that we do. So that's sort of the context of it. I did, look over the sign bylaw and the administrative policy to see, if there was room that just fit it all. And I guess I don't really have the answer to that, but it seems that there's, it didn't really fit to me under as a charitable and political sign. But
Informational?
it was a public interest sign, and and you have the special provisions for a public interest sign. So we wanted to bring this to your attention. I think it was several years ago, but we're looking at this again. We got putting these signs up, and it said in the neighboring communities, and replacing the signs as we have them available on Route 2, and we'd like to be able to install them in the locations that I indicated.
So 4 signs.
Well, right now we'd like to put 4 on the Assabet River.
Aspect, right.
And 4 on the Concord River. In the future, we'd like to put some on the Sudbury River, but we don't have the signs available right now. We're hoping in 2017 to get more signs made.
And you already have them on Route 2?
We have them on Route 2. We have Assabet River signs. So Mass DOT is replacing the ones for the Assabet River, and said they're willing to replace the ones on the Sudbury River when we can provide them the signs.
Okay.
So it's Pine Street?
So for the Assabet River, we're looking at on either side of Main Street in West Concord, right by Dino's Pizzeria there. And then on
Pine Street.
As sort of more visible areas. And the Concord River on either side of Lowell Road and Monument Street are, really key ones, considering how much traffic goes through those areas and, how important it is on Monument Street for that.
So the ones on the Concord River are right down here at the bridge, is that correct? And the ones on Monument Street are at the Flint Bridge?
Yes.
And they'll be up on the roadway?
They'd be road signs, with a standard road post and the standard height that DPW puts its signs
As you
at.
approach the bridge from either direction?
Right, and we've left the exact placement of the signs to DPW to determine where is best for, vehicular and pedestrian safety.
So would these be viewed as kind of a gift to the town, and then the town installs them and is responsible for keeping them up and?
Ideally not. Public Works, I think, hopes to not get in the business of installing signs like
Yeah.
this and maintaining them and that sort of thing. If it's the board's wish to locate them in the public right
I
of way.
just wondering, the alternative is, I mean, is your organization going to be around indefinitely, and is this something that you would take on the responsibility and liability and whatever else?
One thing is, I think the responsibility for keeping the signs in good shape. So, for example, some of them have faded over the past
Yeah.
15 years. So we are taking responsibility to put up new ones, to provide new ones that aren't faded. So there's that aspect of it that I think certainly that seems to be in our
The stewardship, yeah,
responsibility.
the Stewardship Council has no term limit. It's
It
around,
continues.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be some type of an agreement, so I think well, the parties understand, who's responsible for what. And I assume that the signs would continue to be the same style and the same coloration and all the rest.
Standard.
Yeah.
They're a standard that I also work with ORS, the watershed organization for the rivers, and we had signs put up on all the stream crossings in other towns, and that it worked very well. I mean, we just asked the DPWs, could they do it, and they were nice enough, and they did it, and they're there. I mean, it was very nice of them to do that, but it did work, quite well. It seemed. I can appreciate that you don't want to add more to their workload, but that is what we did in the other
What is
communities.
Chris, what is the process of?
We provide the post, by the way. And
Yep, you mentioned that in your letter. What is the policy with respect to private organizations posting something of a permanent nature on public land? Not should they be allowed to do it,
Right.
but
No, I don't think
the-
we're a private organization.
a nonprofit organization.
So the Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council is actually made up of representatives
That's it,
of
I'll
all
just
the-
say organization. And I,
Yeah,
that
it's
wasn't-
right. So it's a quasi-governmental organization. I mean, it's under the
Wasn't aimed
auspices-
at what kind, it was aimed at, do we have a policy with respect to non-town
Right.
folks putting up permanent signs, the actual physical construction of them?
We don't have a policy. There's only a limited number of them, and the board has authorized a few of them in the distant past. Not since I've been here. I don't recall the board authorizing any. And you've been asked by the Rotary Club, and I think maybe the Lions Club, and a few church groups. So we don't really have a policy other than the board grants approval of a location, a location.
I know there's been a lot of discussion, the public-private partnership group is looking into the issues of, how does these type of things work out, and I think one of the recommendations is that there's some type of a written agreement or understanding of who's responsible for what, and, the liability, just so that in the future, if something comes up, and you've got different people dealing with it, there's some parameters all set. And it would seem to me that might be useful in the situation. like
That's the
this.
nature of the question I have,
Yeah.
is we have this committee worrying about public-private partnerships. This is, relatively speaking, not a big deal.
Yeah,
But the issue that Tom is alluding to is we get a nice gift of X and then spend Y keeping it, functioning. And sometimes that's, not so good, right? My concern is not that, but my concern is the one expressed by Chris, and that is, if we said yes to you, how do I say no to the Kiwanis next week? Or the Lions Club, or the Rotary, or any other who wants to put a sign up at all of the entrances to Concord that says, we're the Rotary Club and we meet at I don't know where the Rotary Club meets, but
Colonial Inn.
Colonial Inn,
Noon on
the
Thursday.
first
I guess
Tuesday.
one of my questions is, that there being private nonprofit organizations, I don't know if that's actually true, rather than us being a quasi-governmental organization.
Is there a difference between a sign that's just designating a spot the, or designating a wild and scenic river versus Kiwanis, I'm at.
Yeah, advertising.
Advertising the fact
Well,
that
I don't
there's a-
know. I think they would contend, I'm not speaking for them, I'm not a member, but these are informational signs meant to convey information. Did you know that this was a wild and scenic river? The Kiwanis or the Rotary, do you know that we have one? And here's when we meet. Rotary in particular makes a point of having anybody who belongs to Rotary, if they're visiting town, to come to the Rotary. At least my grandfather was a member of Rotary, that's what they did. But that's my concern, is I don't know on what basis we would be able to say, well, yeah, this is pretty good, but I don't know.
And similar to Rotary, there are some churches that have asked for signs on major roads directing different groups to locate the church. I think there's one out on Walden Street that's been there for many years.
So we actually have some.
Yes. So I think there are a lot of requests. These signs are attractive, I think. I was a little disappointed about when the original request from some years ago wasn't approved, but it would have been inconsistent of the board to authorize some of these signs and not others. It might be something you want to take a look at, because I was not opposed to the Rotary signs. Those are very common in Bedford, and most towns around us allow those. These are a little different in nature because they're telling the general public providing some information. It's a little different from either churches or service clubs. But it's a good question to ask, because I suspect you will receive other inquiries from people asking.
Would it be a significant inconvenience for you folks if we postponed this? Not only so we could check a little bit, but I think given the nature of this, I'd want to have all of the board be able to weigh in on this. And we've not talked about it before, and I haven't heard from either Alice or Steve. And because of the precedent issue and the public-private partnership issue, I'd like to try to get this right.
Yeah, sure. What, I guess a couple of things. One is, what kind of time frame do you want us to?
We have a meeting next Monday. It's an early meeting because of, I don't know why, but it was an early meeting. But we're gonna just have a regular full agenda because we don't really have a hard stop time like we thought we did. So we could try to do it then if we could get opinion. Our next meeting is not until September 12th, but I would try to get an answer for you at our next meeting. But if it isn't a big inconvenience, I'd prefer to have the full board.
That's fine, yeah. And
Yeah,
the
that
only
sounds
other thing I was saying is to see if we could get a draft of a written agreement, but I don't think we can do that in the in 2-week timeframe.
I don't even think you need that. I think we could stipulate, and supposing we approved it, we could stipulate that before any signs could be installed, the town manager would need to approve an agreement with respect to the installation and maintenance of the signs. So that could be part of, if we did approve it, that could be part of our motion to approve. So I don't think you'd need to get that, except be willing to say that's okay. If it is. Is that all right?
Sounds
Very good.
fine.
Thank you
Yes.
both
Thank you
very
very
much
much.
for coming.
for considering this. We really.
It's our pleasure. Glad.
I think it's a
glad to
great
see it.
idea, and they're nice signs, and it is informational. But
And we ought to
there
know
are
more about it too.
bigger issues that
So you'll
always
take
get
it up again
involved.
next
Let's put it
15th?
on the agenda for the 15th to see if we can get some opinion and make sure that both Alice and Sue, you're not going to be here on the.
I'm not going to be here, but
But you've weighed in.
I've weighed in.
Okay, so that's all right.
Just a separate question. I've noticed kayaking up and down signs sort of randomly, not in Concord, but out into Sudbury and beyond. Are there postings of signs on the rivers themselves?
To the don't eat the fish signs,
Or
or which?
are these
They're
wild
not-
and scenic signs?
No, not wild and scenic.
I don't know which signs you're
There
referring
are
to.
fish advisory signs.
Yeah.
No,
And
not
Steve
the
and
don't
I-
eat the fish. These are, I can pick it up.
Kayaking signs?
No, they're signs. Some of them are in, some of them are falling apart. Some of them are old
There's old Great Meadow signs.
No, this is, going towards Sudbury and beyond, so,
Maybe you guys could,
yeah, we don't have to do this now.
right? All right, thank you both very much again. So the next item, I'm going to skip ahead just to item 15. If Alice does not get here, we're going to postpone that. And the reason I say that is I have a question. I don't think this got out of the Ways and Means Committee.
Okay.
So I don't know much about state governance, but I think if it didn't get out, it's dead, and it has to come back again. So maybe we should wait until
Not a rush.
it becomes alive again. But Alice would know, so we'll get there. Item 14 is board communication between board meetings. So, as you know, when I first came on the board, as a selectman, every Friday afternoon, the police car would roll into my driveway and hand us a pile of stuff. And the folders that they came in are still underneath, at least they were the last time I looked, still underneath that. So we changed that, and we're doing this. The question is, what other kinds of communication that we engage in could we make more effective? For example, I think the clip is completely outdated, right? To have a big stack of paper in there that we have to come in here and read, no offense to any of it, most of it is not time sensitive, not critically important. Much of it is posted otherwise, like the meeting calendar. So do we need that clip, or should we just simply authorize the chair to come in and read it? And if the chair thinks something's important, he asks Andrew to make sure it's sent to everybody. I don't know. That's why. You'll notice tonight's agenda, we have gazillions of minutes that we approved. And if you know anything about our minutes, they're fairly extensive. Do they need to be? Could we have, instead of extensive minutes, much more compact minutes, and also have a podcast of our board meetings? We have video, like it's being taped now, but we could make a podcast just of the audio and have it up online so people could, if they're interested in a rather terse item on the agenda, click on it, and we could get the podcast set up so that it had like a table of contents. If you want to hear about signage, go to 6 minutes and 28 seconds. I don't exactly know how that works, but I know it happens. So that's an issue. Chris and I have discussed, and Chris had asked the question, is the way that Chris communicates between board meetings effective? And the way I would characterize that is we ask him what we think are simple questions, and he then has to spend a significant amount of time answering what in fact is a complicated question. Do we find that effective? I told him I thought it was effective, but I'm the only one on the board. So it's those kind of things. And as you know, it's also related to an initiative that we started and haven't made progress on, and that is when we come to this meeting, our agenda ought to be up. It ought to be hyperlinked to agenda items so that somebody at home, when we come to talking about item X, up comes some information there for them to look at. Andrew and I will work on that. We'll get that squared away. So, have I forgotten any?
No, I think that covers it.
This seems like it would go along, it could be part of the revamping of the website. All of this is really moving to a more electronic format. And I assume that there would be a paper backup for those who feel uncomfortable
Well, the
with.
stuff is always posted.
Right,
So
right,
if
so
you
there's
want
always, if you want it, you can find it. But,
And even though we have, for example, even though we do all of this stuff electronically on our desks, when we come here, is always an agenda and always a set of motions. So even though they're all posted,
Right.
This is an immediate thing that so that can continue.
I find that what goes on during the week, getting the letters and the updates, the information, extremely useful. I also think that the minutes, even though they are quite extensive, and I don't know sort of the time issues that are involved in that, but having them be quite extensive, I think, is beneficial in the end, in that it provides anybody who wishes to kind of review and see how much goes on. There's an enormous amount that goes on in the town week after week. And sometimes the details of it, if we just have that, this came up, we took a vote, it got passed, I think people don't get the true feel of how much does go into the deliberation that is made on these. And I do think that they're probably getting fewer and fewer, but not everybody is up to date in terms of technology. And I would hate to kind of exclude them from getting, having the ability to get information. I'm sure we can do both. And I think the more we can rely on technology, the better. And as you said, if we could have things up so when people do tune in, they can get more information and have ability to kind of figure out, okay, well, this is something I'm really interested in. I'd like to find out more about it. Being new, I've gotten used to this process and think it works pretty well.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we're in a ditch and we need to get out, but my interest is, can we be more effective, and can we be more transparent and helpful to the citizens to kind of make sense of what's going on and participate.
And I think it's important that we don't burden the administration with having to do things which may not be necessary, in terms of it may take a lot of effort to get very little benefit to the citizens. So I think I need to get feedback from you as well.
So my question is, are we talking about access for Concord to, the full sense of our select board meetings and the discussions? In which case, let's put the ability to, whether somebody is interactive or not aside for a second, because I would assume that a link to a podcast would probably be more accurate than, with no disrespect to Andrew or anybody, than the minutes. I'm the clerk right now. I go over the minutes and I try to go to my notes and figure it, but so an actual link to our.
There was no reason we couldn't do both. I mean, there's no issue there. I think if it's your view that these detailed notes are a good way, certainly they would probably be quicker if you knew what you were looking for than have to roll through a podcast. But there's other people might find just listening to an audio file more interesting. I don't know. I don't see why we couldn't do both of those. I'm hoping, I think that when Andrew gets in and gets settled down, there's some additional things that he will be able to do. And so, any efficiencies we can gain in his time, given the opportunity to do something else. So.
I think it's an open question that we should keep open, to keep trying to improve and getting feedback in terms of what seems to work and make sense, and not be too burdensome, but also can be beneficial. I find that the letters, knowing that with the Keno, for instance, knowing that you communicated and seeing the letter or the email from the police chief, that's very useful to me. And the amount of, as I say, that type of information that goes on, there's an awful lot that, wouldn't make sense for you to each meeting go through all the things that you've done. It's easier, we're aware of it, and can ask a question if, it seems to be necessary.
Okay, Chris, do you have any comments on this area?
No, I agree that the way we handle correspondence is not all that efficient. So we might have 3 weeks worth of mail that sits around for everybody to come in. Part of my objective would be to make it easier to be a select person, so that you don't have to come in every weekend and read some of which is junk mail, obviously, and that you sort through. We get the important correspondence to you right away. So you're seeing the citizens' mail, but the newsletters and all that stuff gets handled in a way that you don't have to go through it all. And if we can get it to you so you don't have to come in. I think that would make being a select person a little bit easier. So that's part of my objective. It relates to Andrew coming on, being more technically capable than I am. There's more that we can do, and I just do want to make sure that we use his time in the way that's most efficient for the board. And on my correspondence, I send the board a lot of stuff, and it doesn't bother me that I don't get a lot back. But I want to be sure I'm giving you what you need, and then the door is always open if you have a question. If I've sent you an update from the police department or Public Works, and something's in there that you are concerned about, I hope you will let me know. It's my effort is to keep you informed. I'm not relying on you that on page 10 you should have noticed it in the third paragraph that if something's important, it's on me to remind you or draw your attention to it. But I'm just doing the way I've always done it in terms of keeping the board informed. But if there's things that I can do that are more, I'll
just speak for myself. I find your communication with us to be excellent. I know if there's something up, I know I'm going to hear about it, right? Yeah. And I know if I want to respond or feel some kind of obligation to respond, I do, and I always hear back from you. So from my point of view, don't stop. The last thing I would want is to walk in here and get blindsided by some issue that we just didn't know anything about, like reporting, guess what happened to the water?
Right.
I mean, that would freak me out.
Right.
So I don't.
Okay.
I hope that continues. My only concern, as I've expressed to you, is I have written often to you and Tony with what I thought were not big deals. And,
you get a page.
Time goes by, and then there's a 10-page response that's taken you guys however long it's done, and I feel bad about that. But that's okay. I'll get over it.
Yeah, and I think you should ask questions, because sometimes you might not realize the complexity, and it's important for me and the department heads to keep you informed.
Well, there's three things that I think we could do. Maybe one is an experiment. So one non-experiment that we could do is we could get podcasts done and posted, and with some kind of note and explanation of how to use it. If you'll allow me, I'll talk to the powers that be and see how we get that done.
Yeah.
The second thing is with respect to the clip. Mm-hmm. I would like to try, and the only reason I'm reluctant, because I'm happy to do it and I have the time, but the next chair might not. But I think it would be a good thing to try to authorize a chair to review the information that comes in to the board in the clip and distribute, maybe with a little note, things that are important. And also a little note that says, in addition, there's these things, and if you want them, go get them. I don't care. But you don't need to feel obligated to come in. And, that way we could try to avoid everybody having to come in, but still ensure that any item that was going to be of importance,
how would it get distributed?
Electronically. They'll get scanned and get sent out like a packet.
Yeah.
I don't see that. And err on the side of more at the beginning, and and then pare back to whatever it is. And I'm happy to do that. And then third, as I've already mentioned, work now with Andrew and Sean, if need be, to get this electronic stuff squared away. So that when we come in here, people in the audience, if they don't have the deep backup stuff, or people at home can see that what we're talking about. And I think, frankly, the school committee does a good job on this. So I might suggest that we, maybe meet with the woman, I don't know her name, but with the woman, school committee, who I think sets it up. And so I'd be happy to do those things and see how it goes. And
I see no reason not to, and I guess the only caveat I'd have is you're putting a burden on yourself, and sort of not every chair may want to assume that burden,
exactly.
So there may be
so
a flexibility.
I think you're right. I'm concerned about that. On the other hand, doing it for a while might also give us a window into less chair onerous
Yeah.
way of doing the same thing.
Right.
Yeah,
So I've got, a while to go while I'm chair.
yeah.
I can do it, and if it turns out it's, Jane becomes chair, she says, I'm not going to do this,
Yeah.
she doesn't have the time because she's working, fine, we'll figure out some other
Yeah.
thing to do.
Yeah.
But maybe we can figure out a path in the meantime. So
I think that makes a
agree.
lot of
I
sense.
agree. All right,
Is there a way to have some public feedback on the podcast approach? That's the one thing I want to know is that, if we're.
we can find out,
Right.
number one, if anybody accesses. That's
Right,
very-
I'm just saying, because we're changing an approach, and I
Yeah.
ideally want it to be more accessible, not less.
Yeah, I think so, and I think we could do simple analytics, like
Yeah.
not only could we tell how many people access the podcast, we could tell what they access.
Right,
So they can
right.
find out what interest there is around X, Y, or Z, so.
Good.
Reasonable?
Absolutely.
Okay. Alice is not here. I'm suggesting we postpone this as a letter of support for the neonicotinoid legislation. I will add that I did share this proposed letter with Steve Verrill as the chair of the Agricultural Committee. And while he had a couple of concerns about it, he had no objection to it. So I think that's fine.
One of the few people who can pronounce that word.
Well, I practiced it. Well, now I'm going to make sure it's on every agenda. So.
5 times fast.
That's right. Public comments, Linda. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
We've exhausted our public.
Liaison reports. Tom, start with you.
Well, there was there is a meeting of the P3, basically planning the agenda and getting organized for their September 8th public meeting. And Alice and I did attend the Concord Finance Committee orientation, and I must say that was, as always, extremely informative. There was the issue raised that unfunded pension liability is kind of a ticking clock, and it's based on factors that the town or nobody has much control over. It has to do with market performance. The one area that we do have some is that there's an assumption that of what the market will be generating in terms of advancement based upon a period of over time, which has not been the case for the last 10 years. So the town now has 80% of its requirements, and the hope is that over time we'll be able to get much closer, but that's kind of an issue that I think he wanted certainly to alert the Finance Committee about, because it potentially, at some point in the distant future, may restrict what the town's finances can do.
Yeah.
But it was just saying the meeting we went to, it was really, I wish everybody could go and learn, because you learn so much, and
I've
he's
been to
quite the
3 or 4 of them,
master.
I think.
You learn something new every time.
Every time you go, every time you go. Good, thank you. Jane?
I was away,
And you don't have anything.
but I'm going to pass it to you.
Okay, so I'll pick up Jane and tell you I attended some meetings, because I have it written down right here. I was there. School committee meeting. They talked about land remediation. Mr. Flaherty had put together a proposal asking a firm about how much it would cost to go out and get estimates for alternative uses of the land over there, parking a field with a soccer field on top of it, or general purpose field. And so I don't know exactly where they are, but the intent was then to go out and actually get proposals to come back and do that. They aren't meeting in August, so the next meeting will be in September. They decided that for the superintendent search committee, as you may remember, they constructed a search committee comprised of essentially, my language, not theirs, constituencies, some teachers, some administrators, that kind of stuff. And they had an at-large member, and they decided to ask the League of Women Voters to recommend to them an at-large member, which I thought was a pretty wise way of doing that. And then, as Jane indicated, I attended in her absence the Estabrook Woods Access Committee, and that's just such a good committee for the town. We're lucky to have people like that. So they're discussing various options that they have. I think the thing that I took away, I'm new to visiting, so it may have been old, but I think when they talk about Estabrook Woods, and the flashpoint, of course, had been Estabrook Road, but they're going to be thinking, I think, quite broadly about all of the access areas, Pucketasset, the Chamberlain Woods, and I hope will be recommendations about what we should do in each of those areas to facilitate access there. So that was an excellent committee, and then
If I can just say, one of the things that the P3 committee, they were very impressed by the letter or the information that provided in the Concord Journal by the Estabrook, and decided that they were going to try to duplicate sort of an informational, because that really was excellent.
You know, I think that the board in its wisdom constructed that committee in a particular way. Yeah. And it was constructed in a way so that all of the voices that we thought would have a point of view about this issue would in fact be on the committee. Well, the good news, that's good, but it could degenerate. But this is great leadership. Sally and Polly doing a great job, and good members who may have points of view but are really looking hard to find a good solution for the town.
A lot of time and effort being put in.
So we're very fortunate to have folks like that helping us out. Energy Futures Task Force?
So in the last couple of weeks, I've been to several meetings. The Energy Futures Task Force is moving full speed ahead. At the meeting for this week, they expect to have the first write-ups of each of the 5 of their subcommittees' work. And I think we, at the last meeting, extended the time period by which they're going to complete their work. They are actively engaging in researching other communities' best practices, looking at our own governance, town governance. They're interviewing staff throughout town to understand the synergies and the overlap where they are. So I think that committee is working really well and really hard. They have some challenges with maintaining their website in the way that they want to do it, but I think because they want to keep everything as good. Yeah. So what they want to do is be as transparent as possible, put all of their research documents and their findings up on the web, so that people who are interested in the long-term energy outlook can find them all in one place. So they are doing a great job. For anyone who's interested in going, you're welcome to attend. They're at 7:30 in the morning on every other Thursday. This week is one meeting at the police station.
Yep.
Let's see. I attended the trustees of town donations. Similar to the Tony's Finance 101, I always walk away with some new understanding about the role of the trustees and how our finances, how those funds are managed. Great presentation by the funds manager explaining the portfolio and the way it's designed. The committee meets quarterly, and they will be undertaking a potential shift somewhat in the way that the funds are allocated. In the mindset of the investment portfolio is the town's interest in divestment in fossil fuels, and it always comes to the surface, it's always addressed, and it's always reviewed. And they've made some changes for any of the direct investments.
I was wondering about that.
Yep, they make progress in that. And let's see, I think might have Can't remember anything other, those are the two major ones this past couple.
I should also indicate that I attended the change in command at Hanscom Air Base. That was
Thank
a
you.
nice ceremony as usual, and lots of folks and lots of selectmen from various towns, so it was nice to be there. Alice, now that you are here, we had postponed item 15, which is the neonicotinoid
Okay.
legislation. It's supposed to
Okay.
be applause, Tom. You know. Just because you weren't here, but a question was, it was stuck in Ways and Means, legislature's done, is it now dead? And does it have to come back as a new bill? And if it does, should we wait until it gets refiled to generate a letter of support? I just don't know.
So those are all good questions. So I followed up with Corey's office to ask exactly those things. And it got stuck in Ways and Means, it did not move forward. That means it's dead for the session. This was submitted by Representative Dykema, and I think our next opportunity would be to, if we feel like this was good legislation, that we could encourage her to refile the legislation in the beginning of the next season, in the next session, so that it can be heard again and maybe move more swiftly to Ways and Means. You had spoken with Steve Barrow from the Ad Committee, who was approving of an approach
And
on
no
support
objections.
legislation, no objections to submitting the letter. We want to make sure we had a cross-section of people who were supporting it. We know the beekeepers community is very interested in it, agriculture committee to some degree. Without objections, I think we should move ahead. I will volunteer if it's, or you can tell me that it's okay. I will draft a letter from this board to Representative Dykema with a copy to Corey. I don't
Right.
see it as an immediate need, but I'll do it in August for when they come back in session.
So it's
after
just
the
for,
summer.
sort
A
of buff
reminder.
up the letter that you had to
Yeah.
make it talk about next session.
And I
And
would encourage her to refile this important legislation that's important to beekeepers and to farmers. And
so then we'll put it back on the agenda for
Okay.
the 15th then.
Was there a sense of why it got stuck? Is it just that it was the end and it wasn't a high priority, or was there some sort of forces against it?
So the use of neonicotinoids is somewhat controversial, and it pits the small farmers and organic farmers and beekeepers against agribusiness. So on a large scale, the neonicotinoids are already registered and regulated by the federal government and the state government. So there are regulations in place. There are some who feel like those regulations are sufficient and we don't need anything more. There are others who feel like we can change. This legislation, for those who aren't aware, limits the time on the growing season during which you can use the neonicotinoids to just the blooming season. And some feel like that's not all that useful. Others feel like it's the right approach. I think that there's a controversy between the environmental side and the commercial agriculture.
So a jar of honey to the head of Ways and Means isn't necessarily helpful.
Good question. Good question.
Depends on who's honey.
Well, local.
All right, so without objection then, we'll ask Alice to redraft this letter and have it be on August 15th Selectmen's Board for approval. All right?
And the August 15th is 7 o'clock?
No,
5 o'clock.
August 15th is 5.
This was
We
posted.
Originally it was 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
When Acton canceled its meeting, we said, well, shoot, let's have it at 7. Our lawyers told us that,
The property owners were notified.
Property owners
Oh,
were
okay,
notified.
okay.
At 5.
Okay, I was
however,
just
Chris, I
glad
will
to
note
get that
on
clarified.
the back of this agenda is a pending meeting. And maybe I'm just forgetting, but I thought our September 12th meeting had been rescheduled to 5 o'clock so that we could attend the Acton meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, because the Acton got moved.
Because Acton got
Right.
moved. So I think that's an error that
So you'll be, we should post you for a meeting in Acton so that the whole board
we
can
could
go
post
there.
the
Right.
Acton
We
meeting.
should also
but
post
But
you
we'll
for 5
start
o'clock.
here, right, 2 postings.
So that just needs to be
At
corrected.
that,
Yep, so post the Acton meeting at 7.
7
7.
in, at the Acton Town
Acton.
Hall.
At the town hall.
And 5 o'clock here. Okay? All right.
Thank you much.
Miscellaneous correspondence of a number of items. So let me go. First of all, just a reminder that September 17th is Ag Day, and that's always a fun day. But last year when we had Ag Day, we had a booth. And the booth was aimed at generating green cards, and I hope we can do that again. I think Steve was the one who got us a little tent and stuff, so.
I'll help man it.
Yeah, I want
Yeah.
to be, and we all should just show up for whatever time we can. When we get closer, we can make sure we got a schedule. But you meet a lot of folks who come by and
Yeah.
get some green cards, and Ag Day is fun anyway. We've been asked to generate a proclamation for FISH, which is Friends in Service Helping, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary. They provide free transportation for folks who need to go to medical appointments. And it's their 40th anniversary, and we've been asked to approve a proclamation. And so, without objection, I'll ask that that get put on the 15th agenda, so we can get that out of the way. State officials have scheduled a site visit to the Engelhard property on August the 18th, and because a number of us wanted to attend, we've had that posted as a board site visit. So anybody who wants to come now, we can go.
And we'll be there at what time?
I don't remember, but my calendar says, my calendar says that land walk starts at 9,
Oh,
but we should be there at 8:30 something.
Okay, just to make
Yeah.
sure.
And where, do we have a meeting place?
It's in the email. I think it's at the property, but it's in the email. I was invited to attend, maybe you folks, I don't know who all got the invitation, to attend the governor's signing of the Municipal Modernization Act
No, I was jealous.
tomorrow at the State House.
I'm not invited.
Well, I'm sorry, if you work a little harder, you know. And I asked Chris, and he thought it would be a good idea. This is a good thing for
Yeah.
municipalities, so I will be attending that
Thank you.
on our behalf. As you know from previous meetings, I met with Sherry Litwack, who's the president of the Concord Free Public Library Corporation, to talk to her about the plans. I've invited her to come. She will be attending our September 26th Selectmen's meeting to discuss library plans. The issue, remember, is the Library Corporation owns the buildings. The town is responsible for the operating budget. What's the relationship between any building initiatives you might have? And so it's a PPP
Yeah.
kind of thing we need to worry about.
51 Main Street, yeah.
So that's good. In that same vein, I had spoken with Jerry Wedge, Executive Director of Emerson Umbrella, about their plans. He will be meeting with us on October 17th. And the issue, it's not an issue, but the issue is we have a lease with them. It's a 30-year lease that outlines what it is they're going to do, and we want to hear from them what their current plans are to make sure the lease is still appropriately written, and if it's not, to get it amended if at all necessary. We have been asked to consider calling a special town meeting to deal with zoning issues for development of Forest Ridge. Is that
Forest Ridge, yes.
Forest Ridge. Jack McBride, remember, it's this phase 2 of Forest Ridge.
So we've been asked to call that.
Forest Ridge. He's asked us to consider calling it. I think the reality is if we're not interested in it, you'll remember that any 200 citizens can petition us. I'm sure Jack could get that done, but so we're going to think about it. But it's going to be on our agenda for the 15th, and I want to alert you to it because the issue for us is not only is it a good idea for us to do this, but it's also a timing kind of problem because we would then have to have a meeting in which we opened a warrant, set a closing date for a warrant, and then set a date for a special town meeting. And we've got, remember, a special election September 20th for Minuteman Vocational Tech. We've got a general election on November 8th, so it's not like we can just, and we have an acting town clerk. So I think we need to not only think about the wisdom of the request itself, but the timing of that request. So we'll get the issue on the agenda for a discussion on the 15th. My intention is to discuss it on the 15th, decide it whether or not on the 12th of September. And then a cascade of events follows from the 12th. If we decided we could open the warrant that night, if we wanted to, and we'll get specific timing and things like that. But
So if we decide to have a special town meeting, it wouldn't necessarily just be on the one topic.
once you open the warrant,
Any
yes, and that's
anything
that if it was just There would, as I understand it, there would be 3 warrant articles, very similar to the warrant articles that were associated with Forest Ridge Part 1. They weren't controversial. If it was just those 3 warrant articles, I suspect we could hold a town meeting in the hearing room. But you never know. So that's part of the arithmetic calculus that we have to think about. Last item, Chris, did you have a chance to talk to that or get an email to the citizen who was here about the lease? Did you alert him?
He was copied on the lengthy one I sent to, so he received a copy of that, but.
That wouldn't have.
I think I sent a brief message to him thanking him
Okay.
for his comments.
Well, it was the issue that, here's the issue. A citizen raised an issue with us at our last meeting about the town manager's ability to sign a long-term lease of 10 years. And his point is, as I hope I recollect correctly, that a long-term lease, something over 10 years, required town meeting vote. And was this an attempt to circumvent going to town meeting? Subsequent to that, I've gotten another email from another citizen making essentially the same point. We agreed that we were going to talk about this at the 15th because Steve couldn't make it tonight.
Right. And I'm sorry, I did apprise the gentleman who, that you felt like you have sufficient information, you don't need to discuss it on the 15th, and I let him know that you'd be relaying
So you
that
let
to
him
the
know
board.
that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I was doing, gathering data to find out about this issue, and I visited offices over on Kais Road and spoke with Ms. Hughes, a town planner, and she showed me quite clearly that in the planning board regulations, the planning board decides the terms and the length of the lease that's appropriate. And they determined that, I didn't read the terms of the lease, but they determined that a 10-year lease was appropriate for this, and that statement, specifically indicating a 10-year lease, was in fact included in their decision. It was also included specifically in the decision of the Zoning Board of Appeals, who met, I think, a week ago on Monday. So the town manager going ahead to sign a 10-year lease, which he has not done yet, but is simply carrying out the instructions of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board, and in the regulations it says the Planning Board. So the Planning Board could have said 30-year lease, they could have said whatever they thought was appropriate in making the decision, but they have the authority to decide, and they did decide. So I think the issue that the gentleman raised at our meeting a couple of weeks ago is moot.
I thought the letter that Chris wrote was excellent, went into great detail. I've told you, my feeling is that it shouldn't be necessarily dependent upon the length of time, but it should be kind of what is happening to the material that's being leased. If it's something that's being transformed, turned into a parking lot, and the assumption is it's going to continue in that form, that there's not kind of a cutoff, that that's a long term, whether you renew it over shorter periods of time for very practical reasons that you outlined at the last time, that wanting to make sure that the property is ongoing and other aspects to it. But, my sense was that this would have been a long term, but that's not my decision. It's up to the zoning board, and they've made their decision. And one of the things legally we have to figure out is you have authority in certain areas and you don't in others. And in this one, we don't.
It's not ours.
Yeah. No, I think if there had not been this explicit language, then I don't know what we would.
And part of their reasoning is it was a small parcel of land.
It's
We're not
450
talking-
square feet.
Yeah.
Right.
So, the rationale, I don't think they were, there was an intimation at one point that kind of this was an, sort of, underhanded or, hidden reasons that it was being done. And I found that there was nothing to support that. That was totally, the decision they didn't like, and they're trying to come up with a rationale why they don't like it. I think it was it's not the decision I would have made, but it's certainly a fair, prudent decision. So.
Yeah, no, so anyway, unless there is objection, I'm going to withdraw that item from our August 15th meeting.
Okay.
The process has been open and transparent.
I think
I
so.
think it was well handled. I mean,
Many
you
times
looked
it's
into
been-
A
all
lot
the
of
issues
hearings and,
and I
know,
appreciate that, because I was the one who said, I think we do need to take a second look, and I appreciate there was a good second look, and I don't think any reasonable person at this point could find that there was anything improper at all about how it was handled.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So in effect, the town manager is simply carrying out the
Will.
decision
Yeah.
made by the zoning board of appeal, and you still have work to do before you can sign it in any event, right?
We have to issue a request for proposals and
Right.
seek competitive bids.
And we have to seek competitive bids, and
Right.
the high bid wins unless it's not a real organized person or something, right? Okay, so that's my one more item. Minuteman Vocational Tech. As you know, we have an election on September 20th. And the election on September 20th is a district-wide election to approve the reauthorization made by the Minuteman Vocational Tech School Board for the new building. This is something the town voted on, approved at town meeting, and then subsequently voted at an election to exclude it from debt. We have a meeting because Belmont voted no, and requiring a town meeting. Now, here's my concern and my issue. What should we do to make sure the citizens are informed about this vote coming up?
What outreach should we do?
Should we? Are we?
Right.
I asked, you might remember when Anita was here a couple of weeks ago, I asked her if we had an obligation to do anything, and she indicated we did not. But I guess the question is, there is a vote coming up. Should we, in fact, do something to say to the folks, hey, there's a vote coming up. Here's what it's about. Here's what you've done before. And, you should you should vote.
And it's at Harvey Wheeler.
And it's at Harvey Wheeler, and it's only from, I've forgotten,
Noon to
noon to 8
Yeah,
or something
it's a
like
limited
that.
time.
So that's that. And the thing that I don't know the answer to yet, but I think we should find out, is there any change? And what I mean by that is there any changed impact to the town of Concord in this authorization, given that Belmont has indicated their intent to withdraw from the district if they can? And I think it's Sudbury's action recently, which was to indicate they are physically not sending any students. I hope I have this right. So, Henry, double check with me before you write something. But
Check everything, Mike.
yeah, right.
I don't need to check with you.
But it was, I think it was Sudbury. I think it was Sudbury who had voted to withdraw from the district, but they could still send students to Minuteman. They have voted to send their students somewhere else.
Right.
So
They're
that
going
means
to-
that the population is going down, which means the cost to
Potential.
various
Yeah.
towns goes up. So I think we have an obligation to tell the citizens
What the impact
it's up. And if there is any changed impact, I think we should tell them. What I don't know is whether we should think about taking a position. I don't think we need to, because the town has already said what it's going to say, so anyway, the question is, what, if anything, should we do?
I think certainly the issue of what change we need to be able to describe and understand, because otherwise we're voting on emotion and not on facts. And whether it's some form of a letter or whether an article of some type in the Concord Journal, I mean, I think that's how people get their information by and large, and probably something on the website.
A hyperlink to,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, well, we could have it be a open discussion of the item here.
Yeah.
I don't think we would rely on an article in the newspaper I think if we wanted to, we would write a letter
Yeah.
to the editor saying, as a board, here's what we think.
Or guest commentary,
Or
perhaps?
I don't know what the right word is, but I don't think we should rely on journalists to have that obligation for us. I think we should do it
All due
either.
respect.
Huh?
Yes.
Out of respect. You writing that down?
No, I was thinking about what I need to buy.
Would that be something we want maybe Carrie Flood to,
I think so. I
Carrie
think
would
what
be
we
a-
should do is if we have, I think if we do it on the 12th, we don't have another meeting then until after the vote.
Yeah.
And given that, I think the deadline is Monday for getting stuff into the Journal for Thursday, is that in a letter? So even if we did it on the 12th, we
It's too
kind of
late.
be out of
Yeah.
luck.
has to be the
So I think we're going to need to get it on the agenda for the 15th, and I think it would be smart to get Carrie to come visit us, so she could inform us about at least what their thinking is. And I know that, I think the board has put together a committee to deal with education around this issue for the district, and I think Carrie's on it, so I'll contact her.
Are we aware of any organized opposition?
in Concord?
Yeah.
Not in Concord, but I think there is organized opposition in Belmont.
Right.
And I have no facts to support this, but I've heard from a couple of people that even though it was approved in Lexington, that's a representative town government, and that there were a number of citizens that
Or less?
were less enthusiastic about it. And this will be a citizen vote as opposed to a selectman vote or a representative town government vote. So that's all I know. But I will, on our behalf, invite Carrie to come on the 15th. And I will also take responsibility for getting the facts squared away
Great.
about any impact change that might occur.
Best we can, because they
Yeah,
may
right,
not
because that can
know.
always change.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's the Sudbury one. The thing that I think is probably more important, because Sudbury sent a relatively small number of students. This is my understanding, I could be wrong. If a town votes no on the general election, yet the election passes, then this is where I think I'm correct. Then if 2/3 of the legislative body of that town, so that would be town meeting or the representatives, vote to leave the district, whether or not they ultimately leave the district, they bear no obligation for the bond. Right? So it could pass, Belmont could say no as a town, and the town legislature could say, we want out, and then they would bear no obligation to the bond. And Belmont sends a lot of students. That would probably not be trivial. I don't know. I'll find out, but I don't know what the impact would be.
So our range of risk or our range of.
Well, here's how much we have to pay now.
Right.
If Belmont in fact left, here's how much it would go up. If Sudbury's students weren't replaced, here's how much that would be.
Yeah.
Small change. But I think
That's not
if those
capital
are,
costs, that's operational
if
costs.
I know it's bond.
The bond is a capital cost, right? You're funded through, you're bonding the new construction.
Yeah.
So,
Belmont would not pay
Correct.
for the bond, so everybody else's capital costs would go up.
Right.
The reason Sudbury would matter is it would impact both the operational costs as would Belmont's. But as a non-district member,
Right.
the plan was to assess them a capital charge. So if they disappear and they're not replaced by other students, then those capital costs
Empty
have to
seats.
be accounted for across. So if that's true, then I think that those are germane facts that the voters ought to have.
Yes, I would agree.
You know, and we could still have a point of view. It's still the best thing for the town. I've got no problem with that. So I'll find out the facts.
so we're going to shoot for having something in the Journal on the 15th of September, the last paper to come out before the 20th?
I think
Or
we should
before.
have we should authorize the chair or somebody to write a letter on our behalf
Yeah.
at the end of, if we just, whatever we decide, at the end of our meeting on the 15th, right? And then we can get it in a timely fashion so that it shows up, a week before the election. And we could share that and have comments go to Andrew so we don't violate open meeting law. We could post it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
All right, does that seem reasonable? Okay, committee appointments.
I move to appoint Alan Saya of 131 Aspet Avenue to the Planning Board for a term to expire May 31st, 2021. Tom Rarick of 315 College Road to the Public-Private Partnership Study Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2017. John Ferguson of 62 Neshoba Road to the Conservation Restriction Stewardship Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2019.
So second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Chris, do we need to talk about litigation?
That would be great if I could have 10 minutes of your time.
All
on
right,
litigation.
so I would entertain a motion to adjourn, not to return to regular session.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?